There's thoughts about young men being left and astray in U.S. society. Thoughts about this. Wow. I want to talk about that. I really do. The Jordan Peterson stuff. Jordan Peterson, whenever he talks about communism, I want to slap him. He has absolutely no idea what he's talking about. He's only read Solzhenitsyn. He says things that are indefensible about communism. But there's a reason that he's so popular, which is that so many young men are feeling lost in this society. They're feeling completely lost. They're and it's bizarre, right? They talk about how, women, one of the things that feminists talk about is that women face what they call a double bind, where no matter what they do, they're judged, right? If a woman doesn't have a lot of sex, she's a prude. If a woman does have a lot of sex, she's a slut or a whore or whatever, right? And that for young men now, it's kind of like that, right? I mean, for example, one thing I've always heard, right, is that women, right? Women say, "Oh, I want to work. I want to work. I want equality in the workplace with men." Well, I'm for that. Women should get paid the same wage as men for the same work. I'm for that. However, I'm just going to point this out at risk of being unpopular, but women should have equality in the workplace with men. So I'm not against that. Please don't get me wrong. But if a husband financially supports his wife, everyone's fine with that. Everyone's fine with that if a man financially supports his wife, right? However, if a wife financially supports a man, all of her girlfriends are going to be like, leave that loser. Her parents are going to call him up and be like, leave that loser. Oh my God. Why don't you date someone who has his life together? Oh my God. The woman's not working, it's fine, right? She's just between jobs. Her husband supports her. That's cool. Maybe she raises the kid. Maybe they don't have kids. So he, gives her a little bit of money to take care of her. Everyone's fine with that. And they should be, right? People should support their partners. If we're supposed to be equal, why is it that if it goes the other way around, oh my God, the judgment, can you imagine? I have never been in that situation. I've always been working. There's been times where my wife has been between jobs and I'm happy to support her, and I'm happy when my wife is working, but I'm happy when she's not. You know what I mean? I've never been in that situation. I've never been the man who has to depend on his wife. And I can't imagine what it must be like for young men that are in a situation like that. If there's some disaster and a man loses his job and then he has to rely on the wife, oh my God, the whole family is going to be like, leave that loser. He's a screw up. He's a failure. And how is that fair? Right? If women are supposed to get the same wages as men, which I believe in, there should be the same expectation, right? But there's not the same expectation. And this is one of the problems. That's one of the problems, and if a girl, this is also true. If a woman is 30 years old and she lives at home, everyone's just like, okay, she's 30 years old. She lives at home. Her father is like, oh, I love my daughter, whatever. Okay. A lot of young people financially, it's very difficult to get out on your own. However, if a young man is 30 years old and he lives at home, oh my God, why can't he get his life together? Oh my God. Again, if it's supposed to be fair, and a lot of young men are facing a huge amount of judgment, Society is telling them, you fucked up, you failed, you're not, and the reason they're considered to be failures is they're not becoming patriarchs, right? And that, we can talk about this, but the way, look, different families are different. In a lot of Asian families, like the grandparents live there and the grandkids and the parents are all in the same house and everyone's cool with that. And different cultures are different. But the nuclear family structure, right? You talk about the Anglo family. There are certain dynamics that develop, right? And it's not like this in all families. Maybe other family structures are healthier, but they have their own problems or whatever. But generally, the way things tend to work in the Anglo family, right, is that the little boy, his father, the little boy comes along. Before the little boy is an adolescent, he's like in awe of his father. The father is the head of the household. He looks up to his dad. My dad is my hero. He admires his dad. He wants to be just like his dad when he grows up. That's normal. But then when the boy gets to be 12, 13, 14, he's got testosterone of his own. And suddenly he starts challenging the authority of his father. And suddenly his father is very threatened by his masculinity. And he's determined to prove to his dad that he's a real man. And his dad is determined to show him that no, he's the head of the household. He's in charge. And the father and the son in the teen years clash, right? And that is what happens, right? And there's a reason for this, right? Eventually, that's because the young man is supposed to go out on his own and become the patriarch of his own household, right? The father is, again, in the patriarchal family structure, the father is supposed to be the patriarch of his household. While the son is living there, he's supposed to be under the father, but he's supposed to get restless and be angry at his father. And so then eventually he's supposed to get so mad at his father that he goes out and he has a wife of his own and a family, and he becomes the patriarch of his own family. It's like this natural process. It's part of the Anglo family, right? And the father, if you want to get all Freudian here, the father is constantly emasculating the son, right? And trying to show the son that he's not as masculine as him, that the father is the real man. And the son, is constantly trying to prove his masculinity and not be emasculated and say, no, dad, I'm strong. I'm a man. And it's this masculinity contest between the father and the son, where the son is trying to assert his masculinity. The father is trying to suppress the masculinity of the son. This is how Anglo patriarchal families tend to operate, okay? And it's obviously fucked up in its own way. I mean, it obviously serves its purpose too. I mean, these things happen for a reason. It's not like they were just invented so people could be mean to each other, right? But, this is stuff that happens. And so, the traditional American family, that's how it tends to be, right? Now, there are other families, you know what I mean? There are different types of families in America. There's, different cultures. It's different. Family dynamics play out differently in different cultures. But the Anglo, the British, Western European, white, European, American, traditional, white picket fence, leave it to beaver American family structure, this is how it's set up. So, again, that father-son rivalry serves a purpose because the son is supposed to have his masculinity be threatened. The father is supposed to be threatened by the son's masculinity. They're supposed to fight it out. And eventually that's supposed to motivate the son to constantly be determined to go out in the world and prove he's a real man and become the patriarch of his own family. Well, that enters a really big problem when you have an economic crisis where it's very, very difficult for a young man to do that, right? I mean, which it is now. The jobs, they don't pay the wages that they once did, right? And the young man, instead, he goes to college for 4 years and he runs up student debt. And then he gets out of college and he can't afford to get a place of his own. And so he's living at home. And the father is still threatened by his masculinity. And the son still wants to prove he's a real man, but he can't prove he's a real man. He can't go out and start his own family. And this is a bad place for young men to be. It's a really bad place for a young man to be. A young man is out of college. He's still living at home. His father is still threatened by his masculine energy. His father's getting old. So, he's getting older. So he's not as masculine and young and strapping as he once was. And the young man is in the prime of his life. He's in his 20s. He's in his 30s and he's getting stronger. This is a setup for disaster. Right? You wonder why so many young men are suicidal. So many young men are violent and angry. What are they trying to do? I mean, they say that the violent young men, they're trying to prove they're real men. Well, it makes sense, right? If they're still living at home with a father who's threatened by their masculinity, if they haven't gotten the ability to go out and prove that they're a patriarch, this whole family structure is set up so that between the time that young boy hits puberty to the time he moves out of his parents' house, it's supposed to be a giant masculine war between the father and the son. And it serves a purpose. It motivates the son to go out on his own, whatever. But now, the way our economy is, that son can't go out on his own. That son is stuck living at home. And that father is still going to be threatened by, and these young men, a lot of these young men, they feel that their masculinity, and then it's weird. So their masculinity is constantly being questioned. Society is saying to them, you're not a successful man. If they ever get a girlfriend, the girlfriend's parents are gonna be like, leave that loser. He's not living on his own. He's still living at home. He must be. So he's constantly having his masculinity questioned, number one. But number two, now feminism. Suddenly, not only is his masculinity constantly being questioned, but on top of that, now his masculinity is bad. So he's trying to prove he's masculine. He's constantly being told your masculinity, is in question, right? You're not a real man. You're not tough. You're not strong. You're a loser. You're a screw up. He's constantly getting that message. On the other hand, every time he tries to demonstrate his masculinity, he gets mad and he shouts at somebody, or every time he tries to demonstrate his masculinity, then society says to him, stop being so like patriarchal. Oh my God. Like that's like, so like, and so he can't demonstrate his masculinity. Every time he tries to demonstrate, he's in this situation where his masculinity is constantly being questioned. But then every time he tries to denigrate it, society comes along and says, masculinity is wrong. We don't believe in patriarchy here, sir. And so he's lost. He doesn't know what to do. And so I think a lot of the problems that young men are having, the depression, the suicides, that's what we're dealing with. The mass shootings to some degree or other. Obviously, the overwhelming majority of young men in the United States who face this problem don't become suicidal or mass shooters, right? Those are extreme cases. But this is a weird thing because, I am a hugely critical of ContraPoints, but she did make an honest point in one of her videos. Makes her audience mad every time she thinks honestly in one of her videos. She said, men are still going to exist. Men are still going to exist. And it's true. And I mean, the fact that she's canceled and her audience loses their shit over this, but it's true. 50% of the population is going to be biologically male. That is just a fact. And so there needs to be a way. Maybe we need to change the way masculinity is. Maybe we need to change the expectations on young men. Maybe we need to change the way, fathers interact with their sons. And a lot of things maybe need to change, sure. But men aren't going to go away. And just condemning them and saying, oh my God, white men, I hate white men, or oh my God, men, masculinity is so awful. Look, as long as you have female and male, there are going to be feminine attributes and masculine attributes. So we need to, there's going to have to, and yeah, young men are in a tough spot. They are absolutely in a tough spot. And the fact that it's a crime on the left, the fact that on the left, it is a crime to show any sympathy with these young men, that is, of course, they're becoming reactionaries. Of course, they're following Jordan Peterson. Of course, they're joining the alt-right. Because in left-wing spaces, if you talk about any of this, people go, oh my God, that's like sexist, that's patriarchal. You're supporting a man. We hate men. Men oppress women. Oh my God. And it's like, you're not allowed. Everything I just said here, I would have been expelled from the Workers' World Party if I'd said any of this. Right? It's like, you can't talk about any of this. Right? So young men, they're damned if they do. They can't be masculine, and they're constantly being emasculated and taunted for not being masculine. David Fox gets it, right? In Australia, the suicide rate for males age 18 to 50 is quite high in the Western world. Yeah. And is it, David, I'm not in Australia. I don't know Australia's, unique circumstances, but I can imagine it's a similar kind of situation where what does it mean to be a man? The expectations, it is very weird. Society, and this is what people don't get is when you change things, and things need to change, the way women have been treated, domestic violence and sexual harassment being routine. And there's a lot of things about the way women have been treated historically that really needed to change. But if you change the way women are, the way men are is also going to change. And sometimes you change one thing and it leads to other things. And, you fix one problem, it leads to another problem to fix. And then it leads to another problem to fix. And then it leads to another problem. And, these things need to be acknowledged. Right. And, even just saying this, someone's going to clip this. Well, no, they're not. But at one point, or maybe they will, I don't know. But, it's like the fact that you can't even talk about this on the left without people losing their minds, that's a problem. And no wonder all these young men are becoming alt-right and stuff like that.